Call to order the Thursday, March 7th, 2024 WTA Board of Directors meeting. Let's start with roll call.
Yes, good morning. Davidson.
Here.
Donovan.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
Lund.
Here.
Sadhu. Great, thank you. Williams is absent and Darwin.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item C, citizen communications. Do we have anybody in person or online that would like to address the board? If you're online, please unmute. Looks like nobody. Well, that was easy. Item D, board action. Consideration of approval to a contract to Dawson Construction for bus stop improvements. Andy, are you speaking there?
Yep. Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, we're looking to enter into a contract with Dawson Construction. This is for improvement to our bus stops. What we're trying to do is just improve the concrete pads, structures around the bus stop for ADA accessibility. And we're looking at somewhere between 19 to 50 upgrades on this contract. This does have an option to roll into a second year. And so not sure how far along we'll get this year, but there is an option to continue the project into a second. So this was put out to bid advertisement. We got extremely large amount of interest, which was good. And Dawson is our parents. They weren't low. The low bidder withdrew, so they're second, but they're trying to work it out.
All right, Michael.
This is a really cheap considering the public works projects go. Are we doing any ramp work or approach work, or is it just as you say, just the pad, just the immediate location of the stop itself?
I believe most of them, the majority is just the actual pad, widening pad around the shelter.
All right, further discussion or a motion?
I'll move we approve the contract with Dawson Construction for the ADA bus stops.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion or anything? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. Item E is the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Excellent, moving right along. Any comments or questions on this? All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Excellent. All right, here we go. Item F, reports to the board. F1, on-demand service study. Mary.
Got to that quickly. Yeah, Tim's going to give a quick introduction.
Oh, yeah.
Quick, just to provide a little context to the board. I do want to mention that this particular project is rooted in WTA 2040, our long-range transit plan. The plan itself has a page devoted to on-demand transit and what that is. So I encourage you to read that chapter. We also have a strategy in the plan that talks about investigating this as a way to fill in gaps where fixed route service is not as useful or not as effective. And so it is rooted in our policy. I also wanted to mention that we also want to recognize that it's also rooted in the HOP discussion that you had in December, and the board made the decision to discontinue the HOP pilot starting in June. And so this is kind of a follow-up item to ensure that we look at all the parameters, including cost, which was one of the major items that the board was concerned about, and address that as part of the study. So the one last thing I did want to mention is also we wanted to provide the context that this is kind of rooted also in the board's discussion about transformation and adding our value to the community in ways that may provide different types of service to the community that we haven't done before. So just want to recognize that this is another little piece to that puzzle, and the possibility of having kind of a new service that would expand to other areas of the county. And that's what the study is designed to do, is provide that framework for the board to make those decisions of where we go next. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mary to walk you through the study progress.
I'm going to ask Josh if he can maybe minimize the faces on the side, please. So if you're online and you have questions, you may need to just speak up because I don't know that I'll be able to actually see if you have your hand raised. All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. So like Tim mentioned, we're working on this microtransit feasibility study right now. We have our Transpo consultants and their sub-consultants, TMD, are helping us out with this project. Okay. So I wanted to first start by defining microtransit so that we're all on the same page. So microtransit is, kind of an industry buzzword right now. You've probably all heard it. So microtransit may mean different things to different agencies, but for the most part, a microtransit system is going to be run in a very defined zone. So there's a very defined geographic area where the program is run. It's usually smaller vehicles, hence the micro transit. So that might be a van or a sedan or even maybe like a paratransit size vehicle, but it is not a 40-foot bus. It is most often on demand. It doesn't have to be, but it usually is on demand with an app. So you can call up the trip, basically in real time. And then it, of course, or I shouldn't say of course, but it has flexible routing. So unlike fixed route where we're only driving down certain streets on certain routes, the microtransit system can usually go on pretty much any road within that zone. So some of the reasons that a community might implement microtransit could be, one reason is a first or last mile connection to fixed route. So this, one example of this is actually someone in Washington State, Pierce Transit, back in maybe 2016, 17, 18, somewhere around there. It was definitely before COVID. They contracted with Lyft to do trips to bus stops and train stops. And that was that first mile, last mile example. And the mile, it doesn't actually have to be exactly a mile. That's just kind of what the wording is. It might be 2 or 3 or 4 miles, or maybe even a little bit less than a mile. But the point being is that you can't easily walk or bike to the bus stop. So this microtransit service gets you to the fixed route system, or the greater transit system, I should say. And that is a service that is no longer in existence, but that is just one example of a first mile, last mile. An agency might want to fill a very, very specific transportation gap. So one example of that is Cecil Transit, and they are one of the transit agencies that were part of our cohort of our Mobility on Demand Sandbox grant. And they have a service in rural Maryland that is serving people that are recovering from drug addiction. And so they basically are partnering with transitional housing for people who have just recently come out of drug addiction support services. And those residents can use their microtransit system to go to medical appointments, education, grocery shopping, whatever that might be, but it's really just for those groups of people that live at those houses. So like I said, that's an example of filling a very specific transportation gap that was identified by the community. And then the last one being provide service where fixed route isn't warranted or just can't go. So maybe there isn't the density to have fixed route. Or is it, okay. Oh yeah, you can ask. Yeah, let me just finish my sentence and then you can please ask your question. So our 40-foot bus can't drive on every road, especially out in the county. So maybe a microtransit service is a better solution, or like I mentioned, maybe the density isn't there to justify adding fixed routes, so microtransit may be implemented. So those are 3 examples. I'm sure there's other reasons that transit agencies might or cities might implement microtransit, but those are kind of the 3 main ones. Yes, so Satpal, you have a question?
Continue, please. I'll ask at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about, what microtransit can and cannot achieve. So one thing that microtransit can do is increase access to public transit services, and thereby increasing access to for those people who are using that service to get to wherever they need to go, grocery, their friend's house, the senior center, medical appointments, whatnot. It increases convenience, of course. It's much more convenient to use an app or to call up a van to come pick you up curb to curb than to have to, wait for the fixed route bus that's hourly service, or to have to book a paratransit ride the day before. Cost savings to the agency is kind of, it may or may not. It really depends on how you're running the service and how much your other services cost. But that's one that's, I'd say, like more in the medium. For the most part, microtransit does not increase ridership. The ridership, so for example, the fixed route ridership for Linden in 2022 had 7.8 boardings per hour for the entire route, average all the way around. Whereas the Linden Hop was, right about 3 boardings per hour, and that three riders per hour, boardings per hour for microtransit is pretty much what we see all across the nation. Some of the really dense areas like Bellevue or Seattle may see higher numbers than that, but for the most part, you're going to expect to have about 3 boardings per hour. So comparatively to other services, it's not, or I guess I should say, it's not going to move the needle significantly if increasing ridership is your goal. VMT, another one of those acronyms, vehicle miles traveled. So that's, a reduction in car and congestion. Microtransit, for the most part, is not going to reduce VMT. One of the things that we saw with the Linden Hop is it wasn't reducing trips. It was instead of a parent driving their kid to sports practice, the Linden Hop is driving the kid to sports practice. So it's just switching who was driving that trip, but the trip is still happening and would have happened otherwise. And lastly, again, not from what we've seen, at least not a really big savings in greenhouse gas reduction. Again, because most of those trips are just being swapped from who is doing the driving. And this would definitely go into the green if we had electric vehicles or other vehicles that are more, I guess, more fuel efficient than maybe what the community is driving. But again, for the most part, it's not going to be a big greenhouse gas savings. Oh,
Can we go back to Mary?
yeah.
So at our last board meeting, Mr. Harpool presented other metrics. The ones up here are the traditional ones. If we look at those newer measures, and even measures we don't have quite yet, for example, the economic benefit, would microtransit lead to greater equity results? Would microtransit lead to greater economic productivity over and above what's already being generated by the other forms? Do we know yet, or we just have to wait and find out?
I think it's we might have to do some more analysis on that, and it would depend on where the service is being implemented. So the one, the main service that most of us in this room and online are familiar with is the Linden Hop, where we already have fixed route and we already have paratransit for most of that zone. Not all of it, I fully recognize, but for most of it. So is it a net benefit in economic activity? Well, maybe not as much if we were to implement a service in an area where there is no access to transit right now, and we were getting people to the fixed route line who could then get to employment or education. But oh yes, yeah.
Just that I believe a little bit of the answer to that question does live in that first column. To increase
Access.
access.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are people who use the Linden Hop who really probably couldn't, or at least very well wouldn't use fixed route, who
And I guess I would just add, access to is how we define access. So for example, Michael's guidelines talked about access to opportunity. One of those was medical facilities, right? So if you're trying to get into Bellingham from Linden, well, that on demand is not going to provide that particular service, right? So it depends on how you define access. The fixed route would provide you access to get into town, to get into the larger medical facilities. So it really kind of depends. Grocery stores is another one. If you don't have grocery in a particular area, in a particular zone, well, you're not going to have that access, but you might have fixed route service. So it kind of depends. Right?
Okay, so this slide shows basically the two kind of goals of the study that we're working on with our consultants. And so I'll just read it. So through a feasibility assessment, determine a preferred microtransit operating model in defined areas of Whatcom County, and prioritize implementation of microtransit within the defined areas. And for that second one, I should let you know that within the study, the project team will be prioritizing the 9 zones, which you'll see in just a minute. However, that will also go through the entire public process and service review process up against expanding fixed route service and all of the other services that we may or may not be able to expand in the next year. Okay, and then for the project itself, as I already mentioned, we have already identified the zones. Our consultants have looked at the various service models, which we're going to be getting into all of this in just a minute. And the project team and the consultants have come up with some zone evaluation and performance metrics in order to rank or in order to prioritize the current zones that we have, and then also to be able to evaluate the service if and when we implement it in the future. And then also the kind of ridership estimations and some of the service designs. Okay, I'm not sure what that was. That was a question. Okay, well, let's get into the zones. So as you can see on the screen here, we have 9 zones that we are evaluating. It will hopefully come to no surprise to anybody what we're looking at. So we have Blaine and Birch Bay that we're looking at. Linden, Everson, Nooksack, Sumas is all kind of one zone that we're evaluating. The Kendall, Peaceful Valley area, U Street, Lake Haddon, Tweed 20, and those two, I should say, well, let me just back up for a second. The Tweed 20 and Silver Beach zone, that is one that we're looking at as a first mile, last mile type solution. So that's one where the fixed route is pretty inefficient in that area. It just doesn't work well. Same with the U Street, Lake Haddon. So those are areas that we're looking at. Can we pick people up in their neighborhood and take them to the fixed route or to the grocery store versus one like Linden that is more of the curb to curb, taking people to places within the zone. And then Ferndale and the Lummi Reservation as well.
Do you want to mention partnership with Lummi on this?
Yep. Yeah, so for this one, what we have been in contact with the Lummi Nation Planning Department and Transit operators, and what our idea for this or intent for this is that our consultants are doing the data analysis for the Lummi zone, and then we will provide that information to Lummi Transit to inform their transit system. All right, any questions about the zones?
What's the thinking on the Bellingham waterfront? It's kind of an outlier.
Les?
So what we're doing is we're also looking, so this is the kind of on-demand kind of look at it, but we also have a Tiger team with a nice mug that is formed looking at can we do a circulator to tie downtown, but that's more of a fixed route, a smaller vehicle kind of thing, but more of a schedule of time where you would pick up and it would just go on a frequent basis to tie downtown and the waterfront and make it work together on that. So they're slightly different on that, but the work that Mary's doing is informing the work that Shelley and Josh are doing on that.
Yeah. And also, I would also say part of it too, so we actually started with 10 zones. So we also looked at Sudden Valley, but very quickly realized Sudden Valley Geneva was not a good contender for this. So we kind of looked at it and said, no, that's not gonna work. So part of this analysis is finding out, are these zones viable? And we do get requests from the community often for service to the waterfront, or I want on demand in my area. And so we're doing our due diligence and looking at the zones that we have received requests for and viable requests. Yeah.
Mary, could you talk a little bit about why the Sudden Valley one wasn't just?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we can kind of see both sides.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So the Route 512 serves Sudden Valley, and it's actually for a more kind of rural route. It actually has fairly good ridership. So what we found is that we wouldn't be able to replicate the ridership on the 512 in a cost-effective way or in an efficient way to get people into Bellingham with an on-demand service. And we found that the paratransit utilization in that area is higher than average, likely because of the geography. It's very hilly and lack of sidewalks, I believe. And so we just found that we wouldn't be able to do it in a cost-effective way, or really in a way that would make sense for the riders, since most people are riding into downtown Bellingham. So then they would have to transfer somewhere. So we maybe pick them up, which would be more convenient, more near their house. But then they would, if we drop them off at, I don't know, on the edge of town, and they transfer to a fixed route, that inducing a transfer often makes people not want to ride transit. The transfer penalty, that's what it's called.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when coming up with these zones, and I might have missed this, are we looking at proportion of households without vehicles, median household income, those sorts of things when coming up with this? Because just looking at the map, I think that would vary quite a bit across some of these areas.
Yes. Yep. That is part of the analysis that the consultants are looking at, is that there's a whole lot of, I don't think I wrote down, or I don't have right in front of me everything that we analyzed, but yes, that is part of it.
Yeah, and I'd say what also is part of it is the mobility patterns within these zones. So the consultant's looking at what are the internal trips, not just transit, but all trips within these zones. What are the trips that go from the zone to somewhere else? And then they're able to capture demographic information, a lot of other factors to kind of assess what's the potential ridership for an on-demand kind of service. So there's a lot of different factors, and I'm sure if you're curious, we could pull that together for you. But it's more than just one factor.
And would you include population in your analysis? Each zone, how many people you're gonna be able to serve?
Yep. Yeah. Population is included. The consultant that we're working with is Transpo, and then their sub-consultant is TMD. I saw that question pop up. And the study is not finalized. I don't know if I made that clear, but we're close. We probably have about 2 or 3 months left. We're about at the midpoint. Okay, so
Have you considered commingling microtransit to your paratransit?
Oh, so yeah, for commingling, so for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, that's when,
Did you read the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So commingling is when you would have a microtransit service that would pick up the general public as well as perform the paratransit services, and that is one thing that we are analyzing that within our study. Okay, so as we're looking at these zones and looking at implementing microtransit, I do think it's important to ask the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And trying to, some of the zones may have different problem statements. So like I mentioned, when we're looking at the map, some of the zones in Bellingham might be more of a first mile, last mile type solution that we're trying to get people to fixed route or to, the grocery store. Whereas another zone might be just really those internal trips and trying to get people to medical or employment. And I'm not saying we have all of these problem statements stated yet, but it is, like I mentioned, it is important as we're analyzing it and wanting to implement this service for the community that we really identify, what is the problem? What is the gap that we need to fill? And is microtransit the correct solution for that? Just pause to look at this beautiful photo. This is the building we're sitting in. Just,
By one of our route maintenance folks.
yeah, exactly. I know, it's a beautiful picture. Yeah. Okay, so the project team, which is made up of people from the various departments at WTA, did come up with some goals for these zones. So for improved accessibility, we have enhance the local mobility for areas that are not served well by traditional fixed route transit, and improve the transit access for priority populations. And the priority populations are the groups that were identified in WTA 2040. And then the second one is integrating with a transit network, with the existing transit network. So growing ridership by extending access to the fixed route transit. And then we also have environmental stewardship under that bullet point as well. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions is also part of our goal. And then efficient service delivery, so providing cost-effective service compared to existing fixed route and paratransit services. And service equality, and what we mean by that is providing comparable service experience to existing fixed route and paratransit service. And for that one, it basically, the thought behind that is, if we introduce microtransit and reduce fixed route, we don't want to make things worse for people who are currently riding fixed route. So we want to make sure it's at least equal, if not better. So not reducing the span of service that they're able to ride the bus or ride the fixed route, or that's basically it. The span of service and who is able to ride. So let's make it better and not worse. Any questions about the goals that we have listed? Okay, so let me take a drink here. We've also been looking at the operating models, and so we can do it all in-house, which is what we're currently doing with the Linden Hop. We can contract out the service, or we can have a mixture of the two. And some of the things that, or some of the responsibilities that could be held either in-house or contracted out is making the reservations. So that, the person that's actually like booking the trip, that could be done with help either in-house or contracted out. The scheduling of the trips, and that's, more of a software solution, but could also incorporate a human element to that. The dispatching of the drivers, the same day rider call, so that customer service rep that's answering a question of like, hey, where's my van? And then the operating of the system itself, the vehicle supply and maintenance, so who owns the vehicles and who is doing the maintenance on the vehicles, and then the facility supply, so where are the customer service reps and the dispatch and the other staff, where are they actually sitting when they are utilizing this service. And we or actually, any questions about this? I'm going to go into some peer analysis. Yeah.
So I can imagine that there's kind of a rule of thumb that has to do with scale. If you're gonna do a small micro transit, it's just easier to do it in-house because it's too small to attract a contracted provider. Similarly, a very large system, now it makes no sense to contract for service because you're big enough. You can have an entire division if you're Houston. I'm gonna make up Houston, right? So that in-house versus contracted, it seems to me that there might be a rule of thumb on scale. Am I right? Is it more common to see in-house versus contracted based on the size of the transit system?
I would say that I haven't seen that, and I'll give you some examples. So one example is Western. So Western, now they're not a transit agency, that but Western contracts with a service provider to provide late night service when we no longer run our buses for their students who are downtown to get home safely. So they're a very, that's a different use case, but they're a small agency and they are a small outfit. I think they have 2 vans that they actually run service. Compared to King County Metro, which is ginormous, and they actually contract out their microtransit service. And yes, they do have dedicated staff who coordinate that service with their contractor, but it is not run in-house. And similar to Ben Franklin, well, actually, talk about it here. Let me just move into this the peer analysis. But yes, I think that's I can see how you would have that assumption, and yeah, I just haven't seen that in the
fair to say there is no consistent one.
Maybe that's it.
We've seen
Yeah.
agencies deploy this, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, it's true. It is kind of all over the place, just depending on multiple factors. So, oh yeah.
Is that because this is somewhat of a newer thought of public transit? Is that people are still trying to figure out how it works best? Or is it just that every place is so different, or the needs are so different that they're trying to apply what works for them? Is that's
I think it's the latter. I think they all have their own goals,
okay?
like what they want to achieve and their own internal processes and their comfort levels with operating, whether they want to expand that to provide a service or whether they're more comfortable in a contracted model. I don't think it's anything inherent in public transportation, honestly.
John says size is not typically a factor. We have agencies with over 100. I can read the whole thing.
Okay. I'm not sure who that is. I have no idea.
So I guess our experience with the hop is that people really liked it. It's a great service. And our concern was the cost. And obviously full in-house is what we're doing, so that cost wouldn't change. But I was thinking, there's other costs. You mentioned vehicle and maintenance. There's labor, overhead, dispatch. Have you got those all categorized? What of the $60, how much each one is?
Yes.
And then I was thinking also that because the hop starts in Bellingham and it's a service in Linden and it's an 8-hour shift, you're probably 45 minutes between when the employee gets here and gets to Linden, 45 minutes at the end of the day. So 20% of your effective time is just getting there and getting back.
Yeah, it's probably maybe 30 minutes. Yeah. But yeah. And
Anyway.
it's 10-hour shifts, but yeah,
A good chunk of your available time is just transit. And so can we, you said location, can we, at the transit center in Linden, that's the location that the people go to work rather than coming here. And that would give us more effective use of whoever, if it's in-house. I'm trying to solve the problem of cost. The other stuff can come along with it.
Yeah, well, we can look into that. Okay, so I'll just mention, maybe we can turn up, Josh, can you turn off the pop-up of the comments, if you don't mind? Thank you.
At the end, I think we have to pull up the comments and read them.
Yeah, for sure. So our consultants did a peer analysis for us, and there's kind of a full report that is forthcoming. for this, but basically they looked at transit agencies that were our peers within the NTD, the National Transit Database. And so agencies that are of a similar size or in a similar size community. And then we did look at a couple in Washington State that are maybe just a little bit bigger than us, but we felt were good models to look at. So City Bus in Lubbock, Texas, this is an interesting one because they do contract their service or their microtransit service. However, they actually, as I understand it, the city kind of runs or is in charge of the transit service, and they contract out all of the transit services, including microtransit. So it isn't that it's an agency that is running transit and contracting out microtransit. The city is contracting out all of their transit services with the same provider that provides its route as well as microtransit. And that's also the same for Fast Connect in Fairfield, California. They also have a mixture of the contracting out all the transit services. However, some of the kind of more administrative type services are run by the city. And then C-Tran down in Vancouver, Washington, they do operate their system fully in-house. So they're similar to us, where it's a system that's operated completely in-house. And then Ben Franklin Transit in the Tri-Cities, where I grew up, is fully contracted out. And I guess I should say by fully contracted out, they still have a staff person who spends a considerable amount of time, working on that contract. However, the entire operation essentially is with a contractor. And like I mentioned, that we do have a full report that will be forthcoming as part of the study itself, but these are just four of the many different services that exist across the nation. Any questions about the peer analysis or these agencies? Okay, so moving on, we're almost there. Our next steps, so we're currently working on a technology and software analysis to see, what else is out there besides the software solution that we're currently using. And our project team will be working on the zone prioritization. And then we'll have another board update in late spring once the report is in its draft, final draft stage, to update you and let you review that and provide any feedback that you may have. And then as part of the discussion, I wanted to make sure we're kind of on the right path, since the microtransit and on-demand service has been a hot topic for quite some time, and we want to make sure we're doing this right and answering all of your questions that you have in the room as well as online, while we're still working with the consultants on this report. So if you have questions or concerns that you don't feel are being addressed in this the study that we're doing, or that it maybe doesn't sound like it, please let me know so that we can make sure those questions are addressed. Yeah.
Do you mind if I make a few before?
Yeah.
Just I want to acknowledge and recognize the problem set definition, because there's a multiple components that go into a decision on whether it's good or bad. Obviously, cost is huge. But also, what are we trying to solve? Is it that first and last? Is it first and last? Is there development? Is there economic development? Is there those kinds of things that all we'll have to go through as we've talked about on the weighting of those. But until we define what the problem we're trying to solve is, it's hard to factor and weigh those out. And so I appreciate this report really spending time on trying to define what the problems are. And those zones maybe have different problem sets to work on. So I appreciate that. The other thing that I appreciate with what they're doing is thinking holistically, and how this on-demand component can work together with the other initiatives that we have, the transit supportive development, for example, the waterfront service, the supporting effort to help the communities develop, whether that's economic development, whether that's tying together neighborhoods, like waterfront downtown Bellingham. So it's looking at holistically too, and so that we don't get caught into, well, that looks good for that one thing, and we're not looking holistically and trying to anticipate what the second and third order effects are of these decisions. And to that end, Sean is kindly leading the effort to look at a financial plan, long-range financial plan, so that we can look at how all these initiatives interact and help us figure out where funding gaps are, help us figure out based on those things how to prioritize, how important it is, and then how do we fill those funding gaps going forward if it is an important thing to keep going. So I just wanted to point out all these things we're trying to take a holistic view and how these all integrate together to advance. So as the board's making policy decisions, we can do our best. We're inevitably going to miss some second and third order effect, but do our best to try to anticipate those. So, sorry, thank you for letting me say that.
Sat Paul, did you have a question?
No, you answered it later, so it's fine. Thank you.
Maybe we could, is there a way to
Oh, stop sharing. Yeah.
chat and read into the record those questions?
Who is that?
I'm not sure.
Kenneth Denenfeld.
Okay.
That's me.
So,
I'm John Denenfeld. I'm sitting in on your meeting. Thank you. I'm with I am with a software, a microtransit software provider called Rideco, and we have about 70 implementations throughout North America, large and small. California, East Coast, we just did SEPTA, which is about 480 vehicles when they're going to be commingling paratransit and microtransit, and do LA. We do a whole bunch. So hopefully we can talk down the road, but we have a lot of I'm actually based in the
Not a sales pitch, thank you.
And I can address your question of who is leading the next step action items, and that would be me.
Oh, very good.
Along with the project team.
Okay, so I think the things we missed were, go up.
Oh, yeah.
Employee commuting, access to dialysis centers and medical centers, student commuting are some examples of use cases for microtransit. Who's a consultant? We got that. Have you considered commingling microtransit to your paratransit service? Yes. Size is not typically a factor. We have agencies with over 100 vehicles, such as LA, using contracted operators and others who are in-house. Go down a bit. We just launched SEPTA, over 400 vehicles, and it is a contracted service. That said, we have small and large agencies who also do in-house. Who is leading next steps? Microtransit providers, demonstration of microtransit software vendors, etc.
For the record, SEPTA is Philadelphia, essentially.
I guess the thing that I would like to hear more on is the overall safety, how that's going for other people's programs, because, we're not training these drivers. We're relying on them to keep our reputation intact, background checks, dependability, all of that. I, as someone who used to own a cab company, met a lot of cab drivers, and maybe wouldn't have gotten in a car with all of them. And I think that the introduction of Uber and Lyft and anyone being able to basically become a cab driver has made that even more apparent. So yeah, it would be great to see, what if complaints are coming in, if charges are being raised against anybody, things like that. is. Yeah, I mean, when you're just relying on people to be not creepy, I guess.
Yeah,
And reliable.
Yeah, and I can address that, part of that from what I have learned from Ben Franklin Transit. And they contract with VIA to provide the service. And so it isn't just any kind of random person that's driving. VIA does hire, I believe, hires them as actual employees. So there is a process. It is unlike Uber or Lyft where, you know, kind of anybody could go and drive it. So there's a little bit more screening in that. However, one of the things that the person who is coordinating that for Ben Franklin Transit said is that they have had more customer complaints than they would like. And so managing that is harder because, like you said, it is the transit agency's reputation on the line, and we hold our drivers to I don't even want to say hold them to a high standard. They have provide an amazing level of customer service, and that's the one thing that I hear all the time out in the community. Your drivers are the best. I'm like, I know, and that's there is a little bit of a disconnect if you're contracting that out with another service. So yeah, I hear what you say in that. In terms of safety, I haven't heard of really any issues of safety concerns, but it's more of the quality of customer service concerns is something that has come up with the contracted services.
Okay.
I can add a little bit of color to that too. You know,
we're actually done with public comment at this point.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to address your question though on safety. And
you could send us an email.
Okay. I thought, okay, so no questions then? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments from the board or staff? No. All right. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. And if you do have questions that come up later on, please feel free to email me.
All right. Item F2, fourth quarter 2023 performance report. Tim.
I can handle that one, and hopefully we'll get you out of here before this is really short. So I just want to mention that we've redone sort of the scale of, I think maybe you can call it logarithmic. I can't say the word.
Logarithmic.
Thank you. Couldn't get it out. It's a different scale than what we had before, which was more of a linear scale. So that will show you more of the trend line for the different metrics. And I think we're doing pretty well in like coming back to some of the original performance metrics with ridership and passengers per hour on all the modes, frankly. So we're continuing to track that over time, but definitely it's looking better and better. From the perspective of increasing ridership and productivity. The passenger per hour for paratransit is pretty flat. I would say that's the one that's fairly flat, increasing the efficiency of that service for the rest of the So I'll take any questions on that.
All right, questions, comments? All right, cool. Like we're good. Hey, item G, other business announcements. With that, we will adjourn. Thank you.